What's going on, everybody? It is your boy James, and since the release of Marvel Rivals, this game has been insanely successful. And with them retaining about 90% of the player base after Season 0, this game is showing no signs of slowing down. Now, I've personally never played a hero shooter before this game, but I can say I am absolutely loving my time playing it. I've sunk almost 500 hours into the game already up to this point, and I don't see myself dropping this game for any other game anytime soon. Now, this game for me has come with very few flaws, but one of the bigger ones that I'm noticing is players' reluctancy to play the role of Vanguard. They don't want to play tank. Now, whether that be because the role can be too difficult, stressful, or demanding, whether that be because their favorite characters are not in the game, yo, you can't do this. You can't. You need to take that outside. I like that he's playing with his toys, but no. I definitely want him to play with his toys because a lot of times he's in the house because the weather's too cold, but not while I'm recording, dude. He's so mad I took his toy. I had to take his toy away because it was too loud. I couldn't record. I myself have noticed if I go into quick play or even sometimes rank, if I'm the first one to queue for the role of tank, there's about a 90% chance that I'm going to be a solo Vanguard in that round. Now, thankfully, since the second half of Season 1 is set to begin, they'll be releasing a new Vanguard, The Thing. The Thing looks absolutely incredible. He has a nice brawler type of play style. Visually, he looks great. The voice lines, everything about this hero looks fantastic. I didn't mean to do that. I promise you. So we should expect the role to be fulfilled a little bit more often going forward. But that being said, I do have 5 more heroes that I would like to see introduced to this game, just for the sole purpose of making the role more exciting. So, starting off at number 5. At number 5, I have Noel, the creator of the symbiotes. First appearance, Thor, God of Thunder, issue number 6. Species, Elder God, and origin, the primordial void. Abilities, superhuman strength, speed, and durability. Matter generation and manipulation, shadow manipulation, symbiote domination, symbiote creation, healing factors, shapeshifting, immortality, flight, and skilled hand-to-hand combatant. Alright, so let's read into his origin story just a little bit. Noel is a primordial deity that came into being following the destruction of the 6th iteration of the cosmos. He was originally content to drift throughout the endless void until the Celestials arrived and began creating the 7th iteration of the cosmos, the Marvel Universe. The Celestials offered Noel the position of King in Black, whose purpose was to look after the Celestials' creations, but awakened by the light of creation and outraged by his kingdom of darkness being despoiled, Noel retaliated by creating All Black the Necro Sword, which he used to eliminate one of the Celestials. So right off the bat, we have a very powerful figure in the Marvel lore who can be seen as a great tanking option, preferably a tanking option on the front line. I think for Noel, what would be most interesting for a team up between him and Venom would be that Venom gets a shape-shifting melee-like sword weapon that he can use for combo damage and extensions, and Noel will receive maybe a damage amplifier or a speed buff. And for Noel's ultimate, I think it'd be really cool if he was able to summon symbiote-like creatures on the battlefield to fight alongside of him. These creatures will have a set of mana health, somewhere around 100 to 200, and they would mimic the same motions and attacks that Noel is to do on the battlefield. That way it amplifies the damage to any given opponent. So coming in at number 5, I have Noel. Alright, so coming in at number 4, I have Su Wenwu from Shang-Chi. Personally for me, Wenwu was a very compelling villain on screen because he had a very faultless reasoning to his actions. Hear me out. Wenwu went around conquering the planet for thousands of years until he would settle down finding the love of his life. When the love of his life is eventually assassinated by a rival gang, he enacts revenge and falls into a state of depression. During this state of depression, a demon from beyond a hidden temple is constantly tempting him and luring him in using his wife's voice. Now, if anybody else in here has ever dealt with losing a loved one, you know how hard it can be to get over that. And when you constantly have dreams or you feel like they're talking to you, those are feelings that are very, very hard to get over. So all in all, it's not very hard to empathize with him as to why he wanted to open that forbidden temple in the first place. But story aside, Wenwu was also a very captivating villain on screen, with him showcasing his abilities to be able to flex the 10 rings to create force fields, ranged attacks, use of his martial artists to conquer. I have no doubt in my mind that this character is a perfect fit for Vanguard in this game. Now, the main issue I think will be is getting the proper license to use him. Wenwu is actually an adaptation of two different characters to fit the role of the movie Shang-Chi. The original villains in the Shang-Chi comics were Fu Manchu and the Mandarin. But due to license issues from Iron Man 3 and Fu Manchu's modern day representation not being as acceptable, they decided to blend those two into one character for the movie, and this could potentially cause some licensing issues for Marvel Rivals. But having said all that, if they were able to jump this hurdle somehow and add him to the game, this would be, I would put a lot of hours into this character, let's just say that. So at number 4, we have Wenwu. Okay, for the number 3 spot, we have the Mad Titan himself, Thanos. I think Thanos is undoubtedly the most no-brainer option to bring to the game at some point for the role of Vanguard. When it comes to the most recognizable villains in the modern day MCU, Thanos takes the cake 100%. First appearance, Invincible Iron Man, issue 55. Species, Eternal Deviant Hybrid. Place of origin, Titans. Abilities, superhuman strength, speed, stamina, durability, and agility. Access to nearly all powerful mystic artifacts and weapons. Superhuman psychology of Eternals. Skilled hand-to-hand combatant. Plasma energy projection. Genius level intellect. Nigh invulnerability. And master tactician. If we look at this game as a whole and we look at the type of tanks that we have that can take that space by wielding the shield, the two that come to mind are Magneto and Strange. Right now, as it stands, these are the only two tanks that can really fulfill that role, outside of maybe Groot, who can push forward, putting walls on the ground, which act as like somewhat of a pseudo shield. So I guess Groot can kind of do that as well. But there's only 2 or 3 tanks that can fill that role. Thanos himself wielding the gauntlet, I see no reason why he shouldn't be able to project the shield out in front of him and fulfill that role of a space-taking tank. I myself would personally like to see him sporting his in-game attire. I think that's just the absolute coolest. Him having the armor, the sword, the helmet, all of that. I think that is just the coolest form of Thanos we've seen. Now, when we start talking about potential ultimate ideas for Thanos, I think there's a lot of ideas you can pull from based on the MCU, but the idea of him snapping half of your team away by the use of the gauntlet would be, this honestly would be an awesome idea, but in terms of balance, it could present some issues, as well as being a little too close to Scarlet Witch's ultimate, in which she vaporizes the team if they're in her radius. Also, we can have different abilities tied to each stone that he uses without his ultimate, and then when he finally gets his ultimate, all those abilities are amplified. So hopefully when he eventually comes to the game, this idea can be implemented in some way, but I'm not really holding my breath because it seems like it's very difficult to balance, to be frank. So with having said all that, at my number 3 pick, I have Thanos. All right, coming in at number 2, when we start thinking of big, beefy, brawlic men in the Marvel comic universe, the first idea that comes to mind is the Incredible Hulk. But if you're not thinking about the Incredible Hulk, then who are you thinking about? You're thinking about the Juggernaut. Yes, at the number 2 spot for me, I have the Juggernaut. First appearance, X-Men issue 12. Name, Kane Marco. Ability, superhuman strength, stamina, and durability. Unstoppable momentum, immortality. Psychic shield via helmet. Kane Marco is the son of Kurt Marco, who becomes Charles Xavier's stepfather when he marries Sharon Xavier after the death of her husband Brian, for which Kurt is partially responsible. Kurt Marco favors Charles and abuses his own son, Kane. Kane resents Charles and bullies him frequently. Kane Marco and his stepbrother Charles serve in the US military and are stationed in Korea. Marco finds a hidden temple dedicated to the entity Sidorak. On entering, Marco finds and holds a huge ruby and reads the inscription on the stone aloud. Whosoever touches this gem shall be granted the power of the Crimson Gem of Sidorak. Henceforth, you who read these words shall become, forevermore, a human juggernaut. Now that's a whole lot, and that's a handful, but a lot of this can be boiled down to the Juggernaut just being goated. Nah, I'm talking. I think the Juggernaut alongside Thanos is also another no-brainer character for Vanguard. I think a very cool passive for the Juggernaut will be for anytime he is sprinting and he makes contact with another enemy, it'll cause a small amount of burst damage. Now, what will make it even cooler is the longer he's sprinting without attacking, Upon contact with the enemy, it will cause even more burst damage. So this will create a very cool dynamic between getting forced off a point back into spawn after you die as a Juggernaut, and sprinting back to the convoy, and you finally make contact with somebody else. Maybe you get an instant shield break, or you can do maybe roughly half of a squishy's health through burst damage on contact. All in all, I would say I have the Juggernaut at the number 2 spot, only because his abilities don't seem to be fleshed out much more beyond this idea of him gaining momentum and never being able to be stopped, right? This will make for a cool passive as well as even a cool ultimate, but outside of that, I'm not really sure what other abilities they would give to him. So for that, I would make Juggernaut number 2. Okay, and coming in at the number 1 spot for me personally, I have Wilson Fisk, as known as the Kingpin. Now, the Kingpin for me on the surface comes off as a very bland character who doesn't really have any superpowers, but let's read into his origin story a little bit. First appearance, The Amazing Spider-Man, issue 50. Place of origin, New York City. Abilities, criminal mastermind and tactician. Peak human strength and durability. Highly skilled martial artist and hand-to-hand combatant. Wears Kevlar armor. Use of laser gun equipped cane and a hollow ornamental diamond stick pin filled with sleeping gas. Wilson Grant Fisk began his life as a poor child in New York City. Enduring bullying from his classmates because of his obesity, Fisk trained himself in physical combat and eventually used his newfound strength to form a gang of his former tormentors that terrorized the surrounding neighborhoods. He was soon discovered by mob boss Don Rigoletto, who hired him and his best friend as bodyguards, and Fisk worked his way up Rigoletto's ranks until he became the Don's right-hand man. He then turned on his mentor, eliminating him and taking control of his men and business interests before expanding his new empire until he became one of the most powerful figures in New York's criminal underworld, earning the name Kingpin. I think introducing the Kingpin to this game would add the possibility of having the first grappler brawler type tank. I would like to see the Kingpin have an assortment of throws, each having different utility, right? You can have a standard throw that deals the most damage. You can have a backwards throw to throw him into the back line. That way he's at the mercy of, your DPSs and healers. And then you can have a forward throw that can be used to cheese opponents and toss them off ledges for a quick insta-kill and whatnot. I just think the grappler archetype is something that this game needs, but not only does he offer the chance to introduce the first grappler type Vanguard to the game, he also has a weapon. We have seen that he uses his cane for different purposes. Whether it's simply used to strike an opponent, the use of the laser projectile that's in the cane, as well as the sleeping gas that can be used to stun opponents. I think right off the bat, we have a number of dynamic abilities that can be introduced to the Kingpin. But it doesn't stop there. I think the absolute coolest thing you can do is to have a henchman mechanic tied to the Kingpin. It'd be really cool to have 3 to 4 different henchmen that travel with him wherever he goes. They will have a default travel mode to where they just follow him around. They can have an assign mode. That way I can assign maybe one henchman to Mantis, another henchman to a DPS. They can also have a defend mode to where any incoming attacks are blocked and reflected back to the enemy. I think there's a lot of things you can do with the henchman mechanic that would create cool interactions and different ways to express yourself as a player that can be insanely fun and cool. If the Kingpin were to be introduced to this game, I would undoubtedly drop everything else to main this character. He's just insanely swaggy. There's a lot of possibilities with this character. I would be ecstatic. So there you have it, my top 5 Vanguards to introduce to this game. Be sure to let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you guys do enjoy the video, please be sure to also like and subscribe. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and until next time.